Welcome to today's deep dive. So, I want you to imagine surviving the worst, most violent storm of your entire life, like a literal shipwreck.
Oh, wow. Okay. Setting the scene.
Yeah, you fought the waves, you swallowed seawater, you honestly thought you were going under for good, but somehow, miraculously, you drag yourself onto the beach.
Right. You made it.
Exactly. You're lying there in the sand, just, breathing, and immediately the world looks down at you and says, "Congratulations, you're healed."
Like it's just that simple.
Right. But your heart is still pounding out of your chest. The ground feels like it's swaying beneath you. I mean, your nervous system isn't celebrating at all.
It's frantic. It's actively scanning the horizon, preparing for the next tsunami.
Exactly. And that gap, that vast, totally disorienting space between physical survival and the internal realization of safety, that is what we're talking about today.
It's where the real crisis actually begins for a lot of people because, society wants to throw a parade for the survivor.
Oh, totally. A huge parade.
Yeah, but internally, the survivor is still completely trapped in the shipwreck.
And today, we're diving deep into that exact, invisible, super exhausting space. We're looking at Alan DeKeyser's profoundly raw book, Out Here in the Middle, Surviving the Space Between Pain and Peace.
It's such a powerful read.
It really is. And the core premise here is that there's a distinct geography to recovery.
Oh.
It's this place where survival has kept you alive, but healing is still trying to teach you how to breathe again.
Right, because it's not the traumatic beginning anymore. The inciting incident is over.
But it is definitely not the perfect, peaceful ending either. It's this messy, unfinished, exhausting phase he calls the middle.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack DeKeyser's insights. We're going to look at trauma, boundaries, and the profound impact this has on the nervous system.
Because we want to help you, the listener, understand the mechanics of navigating this space. Like, how do you get from surviving an event to actually finding sustainable peace?
We really have to look at the psychological infrastructure of the middle.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think society has a fundamental misunderstanding of what trauma recovery actually looks like.
Completely. It's heavily romanticized.
Right. We are so conditioned to expect healing to look like a 30-second inspirational movie montage.
Yes, the classic movie trope.
You know exactly the one. Sad piano music plays, the protagonist looks wistfully out a rainy window.
The clouds part.
Exactly. Upbeat music kicks in, they start jogging, they throw away a box of old photos, and boom, they're perfectly whole.
Yeah, but that narrative only serves the comfort of the spectator, right? Not the reality of the survivor.
It's so dismissive of the actual work.
It really is. And DeKeyser just strips away all that cinematic gloss.
Yeah.
He illustrates that the middle is actually waking up and finding your own body feels impossibly heavy.
Like you're wearing lead.
Yeah. It's the grueling task of just paying your electric bill or answering mundane text messages, going to the grocery store.
Maintaining totally normal conversations when you're secretly falling apart.
Exactly. Your internal alarm system is screaming, demanding you completely shut down, but you have to pick out produce.
I mean, I see the contrast there, but let's look at the mechanics of why that happens. Because DeKeyser makes a very sharp distinction between survival and peace.
He does.
Aren't those two things inherently linked, though? Like, if you survive, shouldn't peace just be the natural next step?
You would definitely assume so. But biologically and psychologically, they are entirely different operating systems.
Interesting. How so?
Well, survival is merely the continuation of breath. It's your autonomic nervous system doing literally whatever it takes to get you to the next minute.
So it's all adrenaline and hypervigilance.
Exactly. It relies on dissociation, high cortisol, hyperfocus. Peace, on the other hand, requires the deactivation of those very systems.
Oh, wow. So you have to turn off the survival mode to feel peace.
Right. Peace is learning how to actually live safely again, which requires vulnerability. It requires a relaxed nervous system.
Which is terrifying if you're used to being under attack.
It is, and what makes this transition so incredibly difficult is a phenomenon DeKeyser identifies as the psychological trap of gratitude.
The gratitude trap. I really want to linger on this because it's a deeply uncomfortable truth.
It challenges a lot of what we're taught.
Right, because we are told constantly that gratitude is the ultimate medicine. Just be grateful. But DeKeyser argues it can become a psychological prison. How does that mechanism work?
Well, it becomes toxic when it's weaponized by the outside world.
Weaponized gratitude. That's a heavy phrase.
It is, because people around a survivor look at them and essentially say, you made it. You didn't die. You should be overwhelmingly grateful.
And to be fair, DeKeyser does acknowledge that surviving is a big deal, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
He acknowledges the sacredness of taking a breath after chaos. Genuine gratitude is very real.
Okay, so where does it go wrong?
It goes wrong when society uses the fact of your survival as a silencer. The implicit message becomes your survival is the baseline, and you have to perform such immense gratitude for that baseline that you're no longer allowed to struggle.
Wow. So you aren't allowed to complain about the wounds you got while surviving.
Exactly. It's like society saying, how dare you complain about the fact that your leg is shattered into a dozen pieces? You didn't drown in the shipwreck.
That is so deeply unfair. You're forced to perform gratitude just to make the people around you comfortable with your trauma.
Precisely, because, people love a comeback story.
Oh, they love a shiny, finished product of resilience.
Yeah. They do not have the patience or the emotional bandwidth for the breakdowns, the regressions, or, the person who is still actively bleeding out under the bandages.
So what does a survivor do?
This survivor adapts. They learn to perform this mandatory gratitude, just smiling through the pain.
While their nervous system is still completely trapped in the storm.
Right. And because of that performance, they are denied the necessary space to grieve what it actually cost them to survive.
That raises a really fascinating point about the cost of survival. If making it to the beach is just the bare minimum, we really have to look closely at the tools we use to get there.
We do, because DeKeyser challenges us to ask whether those exact tools that saved us in the ocean are now, secretly drowning us on dry land.
That is such a vivid image, and it transitions us perfectly into one of his most radical concepts. He completely dismantles this cliché, this idea that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, he takes a sledgehammer to that whole notion.
I have to admit, I despise the phrase, "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger."
It's the worst.
It always feels less like genuine comfort and more like a convenient bumper sticker,
Yeah.
Just used to make someone else's horrific pain easier for the public to digest.
It totally minimizes the suffering.
But I want to play devil's advocate for just a second here. Doesn't trauma often forge very real, undeniable strengths? I mean, DeKeyser himself admits he gained certain skills from his experiences.
What's fascinating here is how DeKeyser navigates that exact nuance. He doesn't deny the skills at all.
Okay.
He readily acknowledges that the fire of his trauma forged highly specific, hyper-attuned abilities, like the ability to walk into a room and read the emotional temperature instantly.
All right, reading the room is a huge survival skill.
Yeah, or the capacity to sense these microscopic shifts in someone's tone or energy, or this fierce, almost absolute loyalty to his people.
Those are real formidable skills.
They are. However, the crucial pivot he makes is in assigning credit. He adamantly refuses to give the fire the credit for his soul.
I still refuse to worship the fire. That line is an absolute gut punch.
It completely reclaims the narrative. He's arguing that the trauma did not invent his courage.
Wow.
The chaos, the pain, the abuse, none of that gave him his inherent worth. The strength, the intelligence, the resilience, they belonged to him all along.
The horrific situation just forced those traits to the surface out of sheer necessity.
Exactly. It is so vital to separate the damage done from the inherent value of the person underneath.
But practically speaking, how do we untangle that? Because he points out something terrifying. After a while, our survival weapons start to feel indistinguishable from our personality.
Oh, that blurring of lines is so common.
Right. Like if you've spent 10 years anticipating betrayal, constant suspicion just feels like high intelligence to you.
Or if you've been protecting a wound, total isolation feels like genuine preference. You think you're just an introvert.
Yes. Or controlling every single variable in your life feels like wisdom. We literally begin to mistake our armor for our own skin.
Untangling that requires a level of self-honesty that is frankly brutal.
I can imagine.
You really have to conduct an audit of the habits that carried you through the storm, and then critically evaluate which ones actually belong in the safe house you are trying to build today.
Which implies you have to leave some of them behind.
You do. The psychological mechanism at play here is identity shedding. And DeKeyser notes that letting go of these survival versions of yourself does not feel like liberation at first.
What does it feel like?
It feels entirely like grief.
Wait, really? You're actively grieving the person who kept you alive.
You are. When you engage in true healing, you aren't just acquiring new, peaceful traits. You are actively killing off old, highly effective versions of yourself.
That is so intense.
It is. You have to mourn the loss of the version of you that, say, accepted disrespect, just to keep the peace in the room. Because, that version kept you from being abandoned.
Right. That version served a very specific purpose.
Exactly. You lose the version that was hyper-available, operating on the belief that love required offering unlimited access to your energy.
Even if you hated how exhausted that version of you was.
Exactly. You might have consciously hated it, but neurologically that version was familiar. It kept you safe. Shedding, it feels like standing in your own home after someone rearranged all the furniture in the dark.
Oh, I love that analogy. It's your life, but you can't navigate it without stumbling and bruising your shins.
Exactly. And what makes this process so deeply alienating is that this massive, grueling internal demolition is completely invisible to the outside world.
Right. While you're doing this excruciating internal work, the people around you are looking at a completely different picture. They just see the public facade.
And the chasm between the life you present and the life you carry is one of the most defining characteristics of the middle.
Let's talk about that facade.
Hmm?
People look at DeKeyser, and what do they see? They see a highly functioning, successful author.
A professional.
Right. They see a man who is married to his wife, Marquetta. They see a guy walking his dog, handling his career, managing his schedule. Because they observe forward momentum, they just assume the storm is completely past.
And society is uniquely built to reward that exact type of high-functioning performance. We look at someone carrying a crushing invisible weight without dropping it, and we immediately label them strong.
Here's where it gets really interesting. DeKeyser argues that being called strong is actually a profound trap.
It's a heavy burden to bear.
He observes that strength is often nothing more than survival wearing a clean shirt.
That is a brilliant and honestly somewhat tragic observation. When you become the strong one in your ecosystem,
Yeah.
the one who handles the crises, the one who never complains.
The one who absorbs all the shockwaves.
Exactly. People simply forget to check your vital signs. They completely forget that you possess human limits.
And he points out a darker mechanism here too, right?
He does. He says that sometimes society eagerly labeling someone as strong is actually society giving itself absolution.
Wow. Permission to look away.
Yes, it is permission to leave that person entirely alone with an unmanageable amount of weight.
Like, oh, we don't need to worry about them. They can handle anything. They're so strong. It completely removes the obligation of community support.
It isolates the survivor even more.
But I want to push back on the internal experience of that.
Yeah.
Doesn't the survivor also buy into that narrative? Don't we start to derive our entire self-worth from our capacity to endure pain?
Absolutely. And that is exactly where the trap closes. The survivor begins believing their own press.
Right. You start measuring your fundamental value by how much pressure you can withstand without shattering.
You hide your exhaustion. You mask your panic because you are terrified of disappointing the people who have come to rely on your manufactured invincibility.
Which is an impossible standard to maintain.
It is. And this leads directly to the critical difference between managing pain and healing pain.
The distinction there is so crucial. If I am managing my pain, it means I am highly functional. I can drive my car, I can execute my job flawlessly, I can smile warmly at the barista.
You're passing for normal.
Right. I have simply learned to compartmentalize, putting the trauma in one pocket and my daily responsibilities in the other. But healing is entirely different.
Completely different. Healing means dismantling the system where the wound is the hidden CEO of your life.
That's powerful. Management is a daily performance of normalcy then.
Yes, and healing is the terrifying dismantling of the need to perform at all. And a massive part of that performance, particularly in the middle, is driven by the desperate need to be validated.
You all want validation.
Of course. DeKeyser deeply explores how the human hunger to have our invisible wounds recognized can become its own specific type of prison.
It makes complete sense, though. I mean, you want someone, anyone, to look at you and say, I see the weight you're carrying. I see what happened to you, and I see how incredibly hard you are trying.
It's a very basic human need to be seen.
But the danger DeKeyser highlights is that you can spend decades of your life standing in front of people who are deeply, intentionally committed to misunderstanding you, just begging them to look a little closer.
And to understand why people do this, we have to look at the psychology of the observer. Like, why do people refuse to see a survivor's pain?
Right. Why are they so resistant?
Because, as DeKeyser notes, looking closer would require them to admit their own proximity to the trauma, or perhaps their own complicity in it.
Fully acknowledging your wound would cost them their comfortable, sanitized version of the narrative.
Exactly. It is far more convenient for them to label you as too sensitive or dramatic, or say you're just holding on to the past.
Because if they admit your trauma is real and severe, the alternative is admitting that they were careless, cruel, or absent when you really needed them.
And most people will do anything to avoid that accountability.
I want to pause right here and speak directly to you, the listener. Think about your own relationships and your own history. How much of your daily energy, your incredibly precious, limited emotional battery, goes into trying to prove that your wounds are legitimate to people who've already decided not to believe you?
It's such a drain.
How many hours of your life have you spent translating your pain for people who flatly refuse to learn the language?
It is an endless, exhausting endeavor, and it depletes the very energy required for actual healing.
And while we can sometimes fool our friends, our colleagues, the people who purposely misunderstand us, and maybe even fool ourselves with this high-functioning facade, there is one entity that absolutely cannot be fooled by a clean shirt and a smile.
Never.
Our own bodies.
The nervous system, the vault of somatic memory.
This brings us to what I consider the most visceral and unavoidable reality of DeKeyser's work: the echo after the impact. Because the body remembers everything, the mind is desperately trying to organize logic away or forget.
Somatic memory is a profound biological mechanism. You see, the human mind is incredibly logical and chronological.
Right, it tracks time.
Yes. The mind can look at a calendar and tell you the traumatic event occurred 5 years ago. You live in a different city now. The doors are locked. The threat is extinguished.
The mind tries to just close the file and move on.
But the body does not experience time chronologically. The body experiences time purely as states of either safety or danger.
So the body is holding on to this echo, regardless of what the calendar says. But why? Why does the body refuse to listen to the logical brain?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to look at the amygdala and the autonomic nervous system.
Okay, the brain's alarm system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Their primary overriding prime directive is to keep you alive. If your past experiences taught your nervous system that a subtle shift in someone's tone of voice precedes emotional violence.
Or that a slammed door precedes days of abandonment.
Right. Your body installs a permanent, highly sensitive alarm system based on those cues.
So flash forward to today.
You are in a safe environment, right, but a perfectly safe person sighs heavily. Or a door catches in the wind and shuts too loudly.
Your mind knows it's the wind.
But your amygdala bypasses logic entirely. It instantly floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow, your pupils literally dilate.
You are physically preparing for an impact that is not coming.
Exactly.
DeKeyser describes this with such immense compassion in the book. He says these bodily reactions are not betrayals. We get so angry at ourselves for having panic attacks or anxiety spikes, viewing them as signs of weakness.
But he points out they are just an outdated security system trying its absolute best to protect you from a ghost.
I love that phrasing. It is your body saying, I remember exactly what happened last time this specific sequence of auditory and visual cues occurred, and I love you too much to let you be caught off guard again.
It is a misfiring of protection, not a failure of character.
I was trying to conceptualize this, and the best analogy I can think of for this traumatized nervous system is a smartphone.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine your phone is permanently stuck in low power mode. The battery indicator is glowing red at 10%, the screen is dim, every basic function is lagging.
We've all been there with our phones.
But simultaneously, hidden behind the scenes, there are 10 massive background apps running at full capacity. Location services are tracking every single movement the microphone is on and listening for threats. The camera is constantly scanning the environment. High-def videos are downloading.
Oh, wow. The processor is burning up.
Exactly. It's burning up just trying to monitor the room. It is astronomically exhausting.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. You cannot just yell at the phone to fix it.
No, yelling at a phone doesn't charge it.
You cannot shame the smartphone into miraculously generating more battery life.
That analogy captures the biological reality perfectly. You really cannot shame a nervous system into feeling safe.
No.
You cannot use cognitive logic to yell at a tightened chest to relax. You have to actually plug the device into a safe power source and painstakingly close out the background applications.
You have to provide the body with repeated, consistent, physical, undeniable evidence of safety over a sustained period of time.
And for DeKeyser, one of his most profound sources of physical safety, one of his absolute safest power sources to plug into, is his service dog, Harley.
Yes, Harley. I love the sections about him.
Harley is not just a pet in this narrative. He represents a vital somatic anchor. The role of an animal in regulating a human nervous system is rooted in deep biology.
What I find so moving about the sections involving Harley is the simplicity of the intervention. Harley doesn't need DeKeyser to sit down and articulate his trauma.
Harley doesn't need the backstory.
He doesn't ask DeKeyser to provide evidence that his pain is valid today. He simply offers a quiet, steady, undeniable physical presence.
And that presence literally, mechanically, helps lower DeKeyser's nervous system.
It communicates to the body, look, this animal with highly attuned senses is perfectly calm. Therefore, we can be calm.
It is the power of co-regulation, presence without demands.
That is so rare in the middle.
It is. For someone who has spent their entire existence in the middle, explaining, justifying, and aggressively defending their emotional state to the world, a dog just sitting next to them, breathing slowly, is a profound medical intervention.
It grounds the survivor's scattered energy back into the present moment, physically pulling them out of the echoing chambers of the past.
But the reality of the middle is that this physical exhaustion, a body constantly bracing for an impact that never arrives naturally, and inevitably bleeds into mental exhaustion.
Because a body that won't relax is attached to a brain that refuses to go to sleep.
Which leads us to the cognitive toll of the middle, the mind that simply never clocks out.
We are shifting here from the somatic to the cognitive.
Yeah.
DeKeyser writes vividly about the midnight torment of a brain that is functioning essentially as a security guard forced to work triple overtime without a break.
It is the mind constantly scanning.
Yes. Replaying a passing conversation from 3 years ago to see if you missed a hidden insult.
Or pre-playing a conversation that might happen tomorrow to ensure you have the perfect defense prepared.
Always planning for absolute worst-case scenarios in every facet of life. Because the traumatized mind operates on a specific fallacy, the belief that vigilance equals protection.
Right. If I can just think of every single terrible thing that could possibly happen, I won't be caught off guard when the floor drops out.
It is the desperate pursuit of the illusion of control.
For a trauma survivor, uncertainty is not just uncomfortable. It feels like standing in an open field during a violent lightning storm. It is neurologically intolerable.
So the mind attempts to build a shelter out of what-ifs.
Exactly. What if they leave me? What if the money runs out? What if the medical diagnosis is bad? What if I am misunderstood yet again?
The mind literally constructs an entire prison out of the phrase, what if?
And DeKeyser offers a very specific, highly effective cognitive strategy to combat this spiral.
Oh, the grounding question.
Yes. When the mind starts spinning out into the infinite void of the future, he forces a hard stop by asking a different grounding question: what is true right now?
Not what was true a decade ago, and not what might theoretically be true next Tuesday. What is true right now?
Right now, in this exact second, am I safe?
Right.
Right now, am I sitting in my own home with the doors locked? Right now, is this spiraling thought actually offering me a solution, or is it merely harming my body?
It is a technique designed to bring the cognitive processor back into present-day reality, artificially breaking the infinite loop of hypervigilance.
But we have to be honest sometimes that hypervigilance completely overwhelms the system anyway.
It does. When that mental exhaustion peaks, when the battery finally hits zero, DeKeyser points out that it rarely manifests outwardly as sadness or crying. It almost always manifests as anger and fear.
Anger is arguably the most misunderstood emotion in the entire context of trauma healing.
Oh, completely.
Society codes anger as inherently toxic, but mechanically it serves a massive purpose.
DeKeyser has this brilliant framing where he says anger is often just grief with armor on.
That's a profound way to look at it.
I want to unpack that, but I also have to challenge it a bit. He talks heavily about anger protecting us. But how do we, practically speaking, distinguish between justified anger, the kind that clearly tells us a line has been crossed and protects our boundaries, and blind rage that just burns down our own house and everyone standing inside it?
Navigating that difference is the ultimate tightrope walk of the middle. DeKeyser acknowledges that anger is fundamentally valid. It is the part of your psyche that stubbornly refuses to agree with your own mistreatment.
It is proof of self-worth.
Exactly. But without direction, anger becomes a violent storm looking for anywhere to land.
So what's the difference between the two?
Well, justified anger, which we could also call self-respect, identifies a violation, sets a firm boundary, says no, and removes itself from the room.
Okay, and rage.
Rage, on the other hand, operates from a place of powerlessness. Rage wants to win. Rage wants the person who hurt you to feel the exact magnitude of your pain. Rage wants to destroy the room.
And the tragedy is that people judge the outward expression of the anger without ever bothering to look at the gaping wound underneath it.
They say, oh, you're so bitter, you're so negative, you need to let it go.
But DeKeyser defines bitterness in a way that shifts the entire paradigm. He says bitterness is simply anger that stopped moving.
It is a phenomenal definition. Bitterness is anger that has set up permanent, stagnant residence in the heart.
It's stuck.
Yes. It replays the initial offense over and over, not to process or heal it, but to intentionally keep the fire alive, out of fear that if the fire goes out, the vulnerability will return.
So mechanically, how do you get the anger moving again? Society's default answer is always the word forgiveness.
Yes.
We throw it around like a magic wand. Just forgive and forget. Be the bigger person.
Yeah.
But DeKeyser is exceedingly careful with how he defines forgiveness in this space.
He fundamentally separates the concept of forgiveness from the concept of access.
This is huge.
It is, because this is where society usually conflates the two, to the detriment of the survivor. We are culturally conditioned to believe that if you forgive someone, the relationship must revert to normal.
Right. You let them back into your life, trust is automatically restored, and everyone agrees to pretend the wound never occurred.
DeKeyser argues forcefully that true forgiveness is an entirely internal, almost spiritual release. It is the active unclenching of your own fists so that the offense is no longer the gravitational center of your universe.
It's evicting the trauma from being the primary lens through which you view the world.
Wait, taking that a step further, it is realizing that holding on to the anger is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Such a classic but true metaphor.
But, and this is the absolute crux of his argument, releasing the anger does not mean handing them the keys to your front door again.
Which is such a profound relief to hear. You can completely forgive someone. You can genuinely wish them well from a safe distance. Release your own bitterness so your body can finally rest.
And simultaneously, absolutely refuse to ever allow them back into your life to harm you again.
Forgiveness does not require restoring access.
And maintaining that separation is vital. Because managing all of this, the anger, the fear, the bodily tension, the relentless calculations of who gets access to your life and who doesn't, it takes a staggering amount of energy.
Your low power mode battery is completely drained just existing.
And that leaves absolutely nothing left in the tank for communication, which brings us to the profound, bone-deep exhaustion of having to explain yourself.
The fatigue of translating your pain for people who refuse to learn the language. I think anyone who has survived anything heavy knows this exact exhaustion.
It is the point of diminishing returns in human connection.
So what does this all mean? When do we actually stop explaining? Because human nature drives us to want to be understood. We want to justify our boundaries.
Of course we do.
DeKeyser writes extensively about the difference between healthy communication where you express a need and a safe person actively listens and adjusts, and the degrading emotional labor of begging to be understood by a closed door.
To understand how to navigate this, we have to look at the concept of silence. DeKeyser distinguishes between two very different, mechanically opposed types of silence.
What's the first one?
Earlier in the trauma response, survivors often utilize what he calls painful silence.
Painful silence.
This is the silence born purely of survival. It is the act of swallowing broken glass just to keep the peace in the room.
It is biting your tongue because your nervous system calculates that speaking up will only invite a catastrophic fight or lead to abandonment.
Exactly. That painful silence is highly toxic. It slowly eats your self-worth from the inside out.
But as you move through the middle, he introduces a second kind, holy silence.
Holy silence is entirely different. It is not born of fear. It is born of hard-won wisdom.
It is the profound realization that your established boundary does not require a 1,000-word defense to someone who is actively and determinedly climbing over your fence.
Right. It is the realization that you simply do not owe an explanation to people who chronically weaponize your words.
We all know this dynamic. You try to explain exactly why a specific action hurt you, and instantly they twist the narrative.
They make it entirely about your tone of voice.
Yes. They deflect, they play the victim, and suddenly you find yourself completely exhausted, having explained the exact same simple boundary for the 50th time. And they're still acting confused.
DeKeyser comes to this incredibly empowering realization. Some people misunderstand you on purpose.
On purpose.
Yes, because misunderstanding you directly serves their comfort.
There is a psychological mechanism behind that purposeful misunderstanding, isn't there?
Absolutely. It actively avoids accountability. If they admit they understand your boundary, they are forced to respect it, which means they have to fundamentally change their comfortable behavior.
But if they play dumb,
If they claim to be hurt and confused by your boundary, they can continue violating it while perpetually playing the innocent victim.
DeKeyser's conclusion to this cycle is a mantra I think we should all write on our mirrors. He says, I am tired of explaining to closed doors, so I am learning to save my words for open hearts.
It represents a radical, systemic reclamation of energy. You officially resign from the job of trying to explain unsafe people into becoming safe places.
You set the boundary, you let it stand quietly, and you allow them to be wrong about you.
Let them be wrong about you. That is so hard to do.
It goes against every human instinct we have. You have to completely let go of the desperate need to manage their perception of you.
You just say, this is the line, and you let the holy silence do the heavy lifting.
But I have to push back here on the reality of implementing this.
Okay.
Setting these boundaries and utilizing holy silence might be possible with a toxic coworker or a distant friend. But it is infinitely harder in one specific, highly charged arena of life, which DeKeyser addresses head-on: family.
Ugh. Family wounds. They possess a completely different gravitational pull.
They cut so much deeper. Because family wounds are tangled up in our earliest neurological development. They touch our fundamental childhood expectations.
And they are heavily reinforced by a massive societal pressure.
Exactly. That relentless dictate that blood is thicker than water, family is everything, and you never, ever turn your back on family, regardless of the cost.
This raises an important question then. How do we successfully navigate healing when the primary source of the trauma is the exact place society demands we find our greatest safety?
It's an agonizing paradox.
DeKeyser delves into the highly unique grief associated with family wounds. It is the strange, deeply disorienting grief of mourning people who are still alive.
You are grieving the mother or father you desperately needed but never got. You are grieving the apology that you finally realize is never, ever going to come.
You are grieving the safety and protection that should have been biologically automatic when you were a vulnerable child, but simply wasn't there.
And you are attempting to process this profound mourning while the person in question is still walking around in the world.
They might still be calling your phone, still expecting you to show up for Thanksgiving dinner.
And demanding that everyone pretend the family dynamic is perfectly healthy. It creates a cognitive dissonance that can completely shatter a person's hard-won peace.
DeKeyser has a revelation here that I think is the most liberating concept in the entire book.
What is it?
He realizes, and states plainly, that love alone does not make a relationship safe.
I want to repeat that because it disrupts our entire cultural narrative. Love alone does not make a relationship safe.
A family member can genuinely love you in whatever broken, limited capacity they're capable of experiencing love, and simultaneously they can be incredibly, measurably toxic to your nervous system.
Shared history does not magically make a person trustworthy with your peace.
Just because someone has known you since birth does not mean they have earned the right to have unlimited, unregulated access to your inner world.
And this is where the concept of setting boundaries with family transitions from an act of rebellion into an act of revolutionary preservation.
We are culturally conditioned to view boundaries as punitive walls built out of anger to punish people.
Like it's a weapon.
Right. But DeKeyser beautifully, radically reframes this. A boundary is not a betrayal of love. In many dysfunctional dynamics, a strict boundary is the only possible way to keep the remaining love from fermenting into absolute resentment.
By putting up a sturdy fence, you aren't destroying the relationship. You are actually saving whatever is left of it from imploding entirely.
You are effectively saying, I love you enough to stop you from continuing to harm me, because if you keep harming me, I will eventually feel nothing but hatred for you.
Precisely. You are consciously regulating the distance to a specific point where the relationship becomes biologically survivable for you.
If that means seeing a parent once a year at a public restaurant instead of every single Sunday at their house, then that distance is the exact boundary that preserves the connection.
To you, the listener, who might be agonizing over a family dynamic right now, I want to remind you of the permission DeKeyser is granting here. Your neurological peace has to matter more than winning an unwinnable argument.
Absolutely.
Your physical and mental health has to matter more than proving the reality of your pain to a family member who has spent a lifetime refusing to see it.
Your peace has to matter more than maintaining a holiday tradition that leaves you physically ill with anxiety for weeks beforehand.
You are absolutely allowed to protect your home, your heart, and your nervous system, even from people who happen to share your last name.
It is the ultimate mature act of taking full responsibility for your own healing while standing in the middle.
Which brings us to the synthesis of our journey today. We started on that metaphorical beach, reeling from the shipwreck.
We examine the initial shock of survival and challenge society's expectation of a quick cinematic recovery.
We explored the exhausting physical echoes, the low-power mode nervous system, the mechanisms of somatic memory.
And how the co-regulating presence of a dog like Harley can mechanically ground us back in the present.
We analyzed the mental toll, the midnight hypervigilance, and learned that anger is often just grief wearing armor.
We navigated the exhaustion of translating our pain, discovering the profound power of holy silence over painful silence.
And finally, we confronted the hardest truth, redefining peace and holding firm boundaries, even when it comes to family.
It serves as a profound, practical roadmap for anyone who finds themselves standing in that vast, unfinished, highly uncertain space between the trauma they survived and the healing they are trying to achieve.
But before we sign off, I want to leave the listener with something deep to chew on, something that challenges the entire paradigm of recovery.
If we pull back and look at the entirety of what DeKeyser is teaching us about this space, the middle, I want to leave you with a provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
We spend so much of our lives and so much of our cultural energy treating the middle like it is an uncomfortable temporary waiting room.
We just want to get out of it.
Right. We sit there, anxiously tapping our feet, obsessing over getting to the mythical end of the journey, where we assume we will finally be perfectly, cleanly healed. We hold our breath, believing that our real life begins when the middle is finally over.
But what if there is no after?
What if the very act of standing right here in the middle, holding both your immense heavy grief and your profound hard-won gratitude simultaneously? What if setting incredibly difficult boundaries, feeling the sun on your face, petting your dog, choosing your own internal peace over being proven right? What if that isn't just a transition phase? What if this messy, unapologetic, highly functioning, beautifully complex middle is the actual destination? What if learning to live honestly and safely in the middle makes you the truest, most resilient, most authentic version of yourself you will ever be?
That reframing changes everything. The middle isn't the waiting room, it is the living room.
You're on the island now.
You survived the shipwreck. You made it to the beach. And yes, the sand is messy, and the memory of the terrifying waves is still encoded in your nervous system. But this island is yours. Build a safe house on it.
That's the work.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, protect your peace, honor the incredible life you carry, and remember that simply standing in the middle is a miracle all on its own.